Africa will pump out millions of barrels of crude oil every single day in 2026. Nigeria, Angola, Algeria, Libya are oil major producers in Africa. Yet, across the continent, fuel prices keep rising, transport costs keep climbing, and government keep blaming the global market for this. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Much of the petrol used in Africa is refined outside Africa, in countries that do not produce a single drop of oil themselves. Africa ships out crude oil cheaply, then buys it back as petrol, diesel, and kerosene at a higher price in dollars. This arrangement quietly drains foreign reserves, weakens currencies, and pushes up the cost of living. It also shapes politics, protests, and policy decisions in ways most people never connect to fuel pump. In this video, I will walk you through how Africa ended up exporting raw oil while fixing this refinery has been harder than it sounds, and who quietly benefits from keeping things this way. By the end, you will see fuel queue, subsidies, and refineries headline very differently. To understand why Africa refined fuels abroad, you have to go back to know how oil economy was built in the first place. When oil was discovered across Africa in the 1950s, the goal was very simple: extract and export. Colonial economies were designed around shipping raw material outward, not building complex industries locally for Africa. Unfortunately, oil followed the same pattern. By the time African countries gained independence, most of the oil infrastructure already pointed outward. Pipeline led to pause. Contracts were signed with foreign buyers. Refineries were located close to consumers' market in Europe and North America. At first, this didn't look like a problem. Fuel demand inside Africa then was relatively low. Population was smaller. Car ownership was limited. Government assumed they could always import refined fuel cheaply. So instead of investing heavily in refining capacities, many countries focus on crude exports to earn foreign currency very quickly. That decision has long-term consequences. Over the decade, refining capacity grew rapidly in Asia and Europe. Countries like India invested aggressively. They built giant refineries capable of processing hundreds of thousands of barrels per day. By 2023, Africa had less than 3% of global refining capacity despite being a major oil producer. Asia controlled more than a third. Europe, despite declining oil production, still refined far more fuel than Africa. This imbalance locked Africa into a weak position. Crude oil prices are volatile and set globally, not in Africa. So by exporting crude and importing fuel, African countries consistently sell low and buy high. Compare this with the Middle East. Saudi Arabia exports crude, yes, but it also refines massive volume locally. That allows it to control pricing, supply, and downstream industries like petrochemical. Africa, by contrast, often has little control. Once crude leave the shores of Africa, over time, importing fuel became normal. Government built systems around it. Traders, shipping companies, and middlemen emerged from different corners of Africa. Once livelihood and profit depend on import, changing the system become politically sensitive. So Africa didn't just fail to refine fuel, it gradually built an economy that assumed fuel will always come from somewhere else. A modern refinery is not just a building with machine. It is an ecosystem. It needs steady electricity. It needs clean water. It needs engineers who understand complex chemical processes. It also needs pipelines that are secure and maintained. It needs consistent management, free from political interference. Many African refineries struggle not because Africans cannot handle them, but because the surrounding system don't support them. Take Nigeria as a real example. Nigeria has 4 government-owned refineries. On paper, they should process hundreds of thousands of barrels per day. In practice, for many years, They operated at less than 20% capacity and often shut down completely most of the time. Yet, maintenance spending of these refineries continued to grow. Between 2015 and 2020, over $1.5 billion was reportedly allocated for refinery repairs, according to official record, even though these refineries are not working. Now, compare this to India. India imports most of its crude oil, yet runs one of the most efficient refineries in the world. India is able to achieve this as a result of stable policy, professional management, clear separation between politics and operation. In many African countries, refineries are treated like political assets. Appointments change with government. Decisions are delayed. Technical problems become political argument. There is also the issue of sabotage and theft. In part of Africa, pipeline feeding refineries are vandalized or tapped illegally. That disrupts supply and raises operating costs for these refineries. A refinery cannot run smoothly if crude supply is unpredictable. Refineries require long-term investment, often over a decade, before profits stabilize. Many African governments, on the other hand, operate under short political cycle and budget pressure. Importing fuel becomes the quicker option, even if it is bad for the economy on the long run. Refineries underperform, governments lose confidence in local refining, import increase, local capacity weakens further. Breaking down loops requires more than construction project. It requires institutional discipline, security, and patience as well. That is why private projects like the Dangote refinery are so closely watched, not because one refinery will solve everything, but because it tests whether Africa can finally control more of its oil value chain. Once you understand why Africa exports crude and struggles to refine fuel locally, the next question is, what does this cost us? It is not just about filling your cars at pump. It is about foreign exchange, inflation, public spending, and lost opportunities for jobs and industry. Let's start with foreign currency. Fuel imports are paid in dollars, euros, or pound. When oil prices spike globally, African countries pay more. When local currency weakens, as they often do, the costs skyrocket for the local government. In Nigeria alone, 2023 trade data shows that over $20 billion was spent importing petrol. That is money leaving Africa not just once, but every year. Angola, Ghana, and Kenya face similar pressures. Every dollar spent importing fuel is a dollar that could have been invested in schools, hospitals, or local industries. There is the subsidy problem. Many African governments cannot pass the cost of imported fuel directly to the citizen without risking political unrest. In 2022, Nigeria fuel subsidy bill exceeded $4 trillion, more than the combined federal budget for health and education. That money did not build new hospitals or create jobs. The money flowed straight to foreign refineries and fuel traders. Farmers pay more to move crops to the market. Food price goes up as well. Inflation creeps into everyday life, hitting the poor the hardest. Essentially, Africa pays more for its dependence on foreign refining, not only with money, but with social and economic stability. Saudi Arabia and India import crude, but refine it locally. That allowed them to control pricing, create local jobs, and develop downstream industries like petrochemical. Africa, by contrast, loses both money and industrial opportunity. Every year, billions spent in importing fuel could have been invested in local refineries, training of engineers, securing pipelines, and building petrochemical industries. That is hundreds of thousands of jobs and billions in economic value slipping through our fingers annually. Fuel importation isn't just expensive, it is a system that locks Africa into a cycle of dependency while a few groups profits. Importing fuel is a structural drain on Africa's economy, affecting currencies, public spending, price, and job. And yet, this system persists because there are powerful actors who benefit both abroad and inside Africa. Now that we see how expensive imported fuel is, the next logical question is, who actually benefits from keeping it this way? That is what we are going to be talking about very soon. The answer is layered and very uncomfortable due to the political inclinations. Let's start with foreign powers and corporations. Global refineries in India, Europe, and the Middle East profit enormously from processing Africa crude. They pay relatively low price for oil, refine it at scale using modern technology, and sell the finished product back to us at higher price. Shipping companies and fuel traders also earn billions of dollars, moving this fuel thousands of kilometers to Africa. Africa exports raw value and import finished product, creating a profit flow that rarely returns to the continent of Africa. Inside Africa, there is another set of winners, politically connected individuals and companies. Fuel importation is highly lucrative. Licenses to import fuel, distribution contract, and subsidy payment create opportunities for those who are into the business. Investigations in Nigeria, Ghana, and Kenya have revealed a case of over-invoicing, phantom shipment, and subsidy fraud. People profit from a system that makes ordinary citizens pay higher prices at the pump without ever owning a refinery. Then, there is the political calculus. Government often fear removing fuel subsidy because of potential protests and unrest from the people. Maintaining import may cost billions, but it also avoids short-term political crises. In a sense, the system creates a comfort zone for governments. It is risky to change, profitable for insiders, but costly for citizens. The losers, of course, are the everyday poor Africans. Rising fuel costs make transportation, food, and electricity more expensive. Public funds that could go to education, healthcare, or infrastructure are diverted to fuel import. Jobs in refining, petrochemicals, and related industry remain limited. Ordinary Africans bear the cost, while a small elite, both inside and outside Africa, benefits from this system. Saudi Arabia, India, and even Brazil have leveraged refining to generate jobs, create local industries, and stabilize prices in their country. Africa could do the same, but if only it breaks this cycle of dependence. Understanding the winners and losers also explain why progress has been slow. It is not a matter of technical inability, it is a matter of entrenched interest and corruption. Foreign corporations, domestic elites, and short-term political strategies all converge to maintain the status quo. Breaking that system requires more than building a refinery. It requires transparency, policy consistency, and protection from sabotage or corruption in the system. One thing is clear, Africa's dependence on foreign fuel isn't an accident. It is profitable for some, damaging for most, and deeply entrenched in the political and economic fabric of the continent. And yet, there is a path forward, one that could shift the balance of power back to Africans themselves. If you'll be following Africa oil story, you might wonder, why can't we just build refineries and stop importing fuel? On paper, it seems very simple. In reality, it is one of the hardest industrial challenges on the continent. Take Nigeria as the most visible example. The country has 4 state-owned refineries. For years, this plant operated well below capacity, sometimes even shut it down completely. According to the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, maintenance spending between 2015 and 2020 totaled over $1.5 billion. Yet, these refineries are still not functional. Why did this happen? This is the question a lot of people have been asking. 1. Political interference. Refineries often became vehicles for political patronage. Managers were appointed for loyalty rather than experience. Second, infrastructure weaknesses made operation unreliable. Power outages, vandalized pipeline, and theft disrupted supply. Thirdly, short-term financing meant there was no sustained investment plan. Maintaining a refinery is a long-term project, often a decade or more before it becomes profitable, but most African governments operate a 5-year political cycle, which makes this very, very impossible. Even private projects in Africa have faced hurdles. Many smaller refineries in Ghana, Uganda, and Kenya were delayed or stalled due to financing issues, land acquisition disputes, and political uncertainty. But there is scope. Large-scale projects like the Dangote refinery in Nigeria are testing a new model. They are privately financed, professionally managed, and insulated from day-to-day political interference to some extent. The lesson is clear. Africa can build refineries, but it requires more than capital. It demands long-term planning, secure infrastructure, professional management, and policy stability. Without this, refineries risk becoming another cycle of loss, reinforcing the same dependency Africa has had for decades. The conversation shifts dramatically when we look at current projects reshaping Africa's refining landscape. The most talked about is Dangote refinery in Lagos, Nigeria. When fully operational, it will process 650,000 barrels of crude per day, making it the largest single refinery in Africa, bigger than all government-owned refineries combined. Dangote is different from past projects for several reasons. First, it is privately financed. Unlike government-owned refineries, it does not rely on political cycle or shifting budgets. Secondly, it is built with modern technology. It is capable of producing high-quality petrol, diesel, kerosene, and petrochemical products. Thirdly, it has a logistical advantage with its own pipeline networks, jetties, and storage facilities. The potential impact is huge. If Dangote operates at full capacity, Nigeria could stop importing most of its petrol and diesel, saving billions of dollars in foreign exchange annually. Jobs in engineering, transport, and petrochemical would multiply. The government could redirect funds from subsidies to health, education, and even infrastructure. But Nigeria is not alone. Ghana Tema Refinery is undergoing upgrades to increase capacity and improve efficiency. Angola is building the Lobito Refinery, aiming to process domestic crude and supply regional markets. These projects share a common goal: keeping more value inside Africa instead of exporting it raw and buying it back at higher price. There are still challenges. Dangote had delays and cost overrun like any major industrial project. Political and regulatory uncertainty can affect even privately funded projects. That is just the truth. Africa can build refineries that work, but they need scale, professionalism, and protection from systemic corruption and sabotage. The bigger lesson is about value chain. Refineries alone are not enough. To fully benefit, Africa needs robust distribution network, petrochemical industries, and energy policies that encourage domestic consumption and export as well. In other words, building a refinery is a step. Building a self-reliant fuel ecosystem is the real prize. If this project succeeds, they could finally shift Africa from being a raw material exporter to a fuel-independent continent capable of controlling prices, creating jobs, and keeping value inside the continent of Africa. And yet, it raises questions. Can governments and local elites adjust to a system where dependence is no longer profitable to them? That is the question a lot of people will be asking. Will the regional corporation make or break these projects? Another answer to this question will determine whether Africa finally escapes decades of fuel dependency or repeats the cycle all over again. If Africa refines its own fuel, the effect won't just be economic. They will ripple through politics, power structures, and decision-making. Fuel is more than just a commodity. Yes, it is a tool of influence. For decades, government, political elite, and foreign actors have used dependence on imported fuel to shape policy, maintain control, and secure profit for themselves. A shift towards reliance threatens that balance. Consider Nigeria again. Fuel subsidy have been politically convenient for decades. When government tries to remove them, protests erupt almost immediately. Ordinary citizens pay the price, but politicians rely on the system to maintain stability and make billions of dollars. Now with the Dangote refinery coming online, the government could potentially reduce import dependence and subsidies, thereby saving billions for public investment. But that also changes political calculus. Those who once benefited from the system may resist the change, even if it is better for the country or continent. Regional dynamics are also crucial. If Ghana or Angola successfully expand refining capacity, they could supply neighboring countries, shifting influence away from traditional import hub. Instead of paying traders in Europe or India, African nations could start trading among themselves. This might reduce foreign leverage over domestic policy and energy pricing. Fuel independence could also reduce vulnerability to global price shock. When crude oil prices spike, countries reliant on imports see local fuel price jump as well. This creates inflation and public unrest most of the time. With local refineries processing domestic crude, government would have more control over supply and pricing, potentially stabilizing economics during crisis. However, independence requires careful management, or else it is going to fail. Any attempt to politicize or mismanage refinery could replicate the failure of the past. Successful fuel independence isn't just about industrial capacity, it is about governance, transparency, and institutions. Fuel independence could reshape qualities, reduce corruption incentives, and allow government to focus on development rather than survival. To understand what is possible for Africa, we need to look elsewhere. Countries like India, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia offer lessons in combining oil production with refining and industrial growth. India imports most of its crude oil, yet it has built some of the world's most efficient refineries, capable of processing over 1.2 million barrels of oil per day. Why does it work? India invested consistently, insulated operations from political interference, and created a domestic distribution network to ensure refined products reach citizens efficiently. Profits are reinvested in modernization and petrochemical industry, creating jobs and economic growth. Brazil, with its massive Petrobras network, learned similar lessons. By integrating oil extraction with local refining and downstream industries, it reduces dependence on foreign fuel and created value locally. Petrobras refineries support chemicals, plastic, and energy sector, keeping money circulating within the country rather than flowing abroad. Saudi Arabia naturally refines at home and exports value-added products worldwide. This strategy allows them to control pricing, stabilize domestic supply, and generate significant local employment in high-value industries. The lesson for Africa is very simple. Controlling the entire oil value chain from extraction to refining to domestic or regional distribution is possible. But Africa faces unique challenges, which are political instability, corruption, vandalism, and inconsistent policy. Overcoming these challenges require more than building refineries. It requires systemic change. The encouraging news is that change is happening. Projects like Dangote Refinery, Tema Upgrades, Lobito Refinery, and Hoima Refinery demonstrate that African-led, Africa finance projects can succeed when designed and managed properly. Africa Path Forward involves 3 key steps. 1. Insulate refineries from political interference. Allow refineries to supply multiple countries. This is going to reduce import dependence continent-wide. Pair refining with petrochemicals, plastic, and energy projects to multiply economic benefit. By allowing this path, Africa could shift from a system where foreign powers and a small elite benefit to one where ordinary Africans gain jobs, affordable fuel, and economic stability. Before now, it is clear that Africa's reliance on imported fuel isn't just about broken refineries. It is a system that affects economies, policies, and everyday life. So what will change if Africa truly controls its oil values? First, consider the economic impacts. Billions of dollars currently spent importing petrol could stay on the continent. Nigeria alone could save $10 to $50 billion annually once Dangote refinery reaches full capacity. Fuel independence also means job creation. Refineries don't just produce fuel, they create entire ecosystem. Engineers, chemical technicians, logistic operators, transport workers, and petrochemical employees will also see new opportunities. When you pair refineries with downstream industries like plastic, fertilizer, and chemical, the multiplier effect grows exponentially. Africa wouldn't just be exporting crude, it will be exporting products with higher value, retaining wealth locally in the continent. Politically, fuel independence shifts power. Governments will no longer be hostage to a global price shock of foreign refineries controlling supply. Ordinary citizens will feel the effect in lower price at the pump and a more stable economy. There is also a regional dimension. African refineries could supply neighboring countries, fostering economic cooperation and reducing dependence on Europe, India, or the Middle East. Imagine a scenario where West Africa or East Africa buys from within the region rather than thousands of kilometers away. This would increase resilience, reduce shipping costs, and keep more money circulating